Well, it's 5 after 12. Lloyd, why don't we get started?
Okay.
For those of you who are already on board here, this is our second quarterly conference call or webinar, Fiscal Fitness webinar, and we're privileged to have a 40-year veteran of Social Security and Medicare expertise, Lloyd Watnick, online with us here today. And this message is being recorded, and it will be available as a replay later on our website, EnduringWealthAdvisors.com. Special thanks goes out to my friends at Dreyfus for helping to arrange and sponsor the event. And with that being said, Lloyd, I'm going to let you take over. There'll be about 45 minutes of conversation followed by Q&A. When you ask your questions, all you have to do is unmute your phone and speak up, and we'll hear you. But in the meantime, we're going to mute the background phones just to keep from getting interference. So, Lloyd, it's up to you.
Okay, Ralph. Can we get the next slide, please?
Sure. I hope. There we go.
Okay, this is sponsored by Ralph and Enduring Wealth Advisors. And we have a present for you from Ralph. Go to the next slide, please. You folks can contact me anytime you want. There's no gimmick to this. There's no charge for it. We want to make sure you get the information that you need. So this is recorded. You'll be able to come back to it, get my phone number, and call me. I always return phone calls within 1 business day. So you'll find that we'll be very prompt in answering you. The reason I give you my fax line is if you get a letter from Social Security that you want to go over with me, if you try to read it to me, by the time you get to the last paragraph, I won't remember the first. So if you fax it to me, I'll figure out what's going on, and we'll call you back, and we'll discuss it as long as you want to discuss it. Notice the ORG at the top of the page. I did a class for financial planners, and one of them said, I understand OR, order of registered, but order of registered what? And he was absolutely wrong. ORG stands for Old Retired Guy, which is what I am. And you'll find that I will spend as much time as you need going over this stuff with you. My web address is lloyd@watnick.com. Notice there's no C in Watnick. People call me all the time and say, you said I could write to you and it bounced back. Well, there's no C in Watnick. It's like Sputnik. Some people think I belong in outer space. If you want to go to my website, lloydwatnick.com, you can register for my newsletter. I send out at least monthly newsletters. Most of them have to do with government employees who are my main business, but a lot of them have to do with Social Security. If you register for it, there's no sales gimmick. I have nothing to sell you. Can we go to the next slide, please? The best way to contact Social Security is to call their 800 number. It's open from 7 in the morning until 7 at night, and people ask me in what time zone, and the answer is in every time zone. It knows where you're calling from. Social Security offices in California are about to go to new hours. They're only going to be open 9 to 3, and on Wednesdays from 9 to noon. So they're very inconvenient to go to. This 700 number works great. Now, it's going to ask you a lot of information. Don't answer it. Just keep pushing 0, and you'll get a representative. And they'll be able to answer any questions you have. Social Security's website, can we go back one? Well, Social Security's website is socialsecurity.gov or ssa.gov. Either one works, and you'll find their website is excellent. So the big question is, will it be there when I need it? Go to the next slide, please. Of course, no politician is going to tell you that they want to take it away. Go to the next web. So no politician is calling for the elimination of Social Security. The big question is, how will it change? And the changes are already in place. Go to the next slide. The changes mainly affect people under age 40. And they're already in place, and they will take care of Social Security at least until the year 2033. Social Security is safe until at least 2033, and that's a very big deal. Okay, next slide, please. Before we discuss the future, we have to understand how the current Social Security program works. Go to the next page. A crucial point to understand, the word social in Social Security means something. The toughest speech I ever gave was in 1972 in Fresno. It was to a Teamsters Union statewide convention, and I was working for Social Security, and the gentleman introduced me as, here's this guy, we can't remember his name, but he's the one who takes all the money out of your pay, here he is. And a guy came up to me, and he said, I'm 43 years old, I've worked in Social Security all my adult life, I have no dependents, what happens if I die? And the answer then was the same as the answer now. If you die and you leave no dependents, you have nothing to worry about. The word social in Social Security means something. The program was designed to achieve larger social goals. Now let me explain that. Social Security, the idea of Social Security was actually established by a guy named Adam Smith, who in 1776 wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, the Bible of Capitalism. Smith said there must be a government-run retirement system for two reasons. One is, as people go from job to job, if the employer controls the retirement system, then employees are not free to go from job to job. If you don't believe that, I was under the old civil service retirement system, where we didn't pay into Social Security. After you were with it for 5 years, basically you were locked in it. If you went anywhere else, you were never going to have an opportunity to retire. Social Security is portable, along with your 401k, and they follow you from job to job. Now, the other reason he wanted it to be run by the government was he understood something very basic about capitalism that you'll all agree with. People with skills that are more in demand get paid more money than people with lesser skills or skills that are less in demand. He understood these people have to have the ability to retire too, so he wanted this retirement program set up in such a way that people with lower incomes get a higher rate of return and have a shot at what I call the brass ring retirement. Go to the next slide, please. So he wanted to raise the standard of living of low-income workers. And we should be proud of our system because our system keeps families together when workers die. I had a cousin who died in September of '08, and he left 2 small children and a wife. He was only 48 years old. And I called the wife about a week after he died, and I said to her, have you applied for Social Security yet? She said, Social Security? I'm not old enough for Social Security. I said, you can get Social Security because the children are under age 18, and the youngest is under age 16, so you can get Social Security also. She said, well, how much will we get? I said, I don't really know how much your husband made, but I would say about $3,300. In reality, they got $3,900. That kept the family together. And the next year, they got a 5.6% cost of living adjustment. It's a very big deal. When I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn, in every neighborhood, they had these terrible places called orphan homes. They were orphanages. And what would happen is one parent would die and the other parent couldn't afford to keep the kids and put them in these terrible places. They're gone now because Social Security pays benefits to dependent survivors. Next page, please. Let's talk about the urban myths about Social Security. The number one urban myth is that the president, the vice president, and the cabinet do not pay into Social Security, and the Congress, excuse me, do not pay into Social Security. Every congressperson elected since 1984 is under the new federal retirement system, and they pay into Social Security. The president, the vice president, and all cabinet members pay into Social Security. Next slide, please. Congress is stealing Social Security's money. That's a myth. Go on to the next slide. Congress is borrowing Social Security's money. And in fact, Social Security is now, for the last 2 years, been running in the red because the president cut the Social Security tax to 4.2 from 6.2%. As a result, Social Security is dipping into its money. Go to the next slide, please. The benefits are not in worthless IOUs. Go to the next page. They're in Treasury bonds. And Social Security in the last 2 years has been cashing in some of its Treasury bonds. Social Security currently has over $9 trillion in Treasury bonds, and that will keep it going until 2033 at the earliest. Next slide. Benefits are paid to people who never worked. Next slide, please. You must work at least 10 years to get retirement benefits, have 40 quarters of coverage in order to be able to get Social Security credits. That's 10 years of work. Next slide. Benefits are paid to illegal aliens, prisoners, and drug addicts. Next slide. Illegal aliens have never been able to get Social Security. Prisoners have not been able to get it since something called the Son of Sam Act. Remember that crazy who said his dog told him to kill a bunch of people? As soon as he went to jail, he filed for Social Security. He said, I'm nuts, you got to pay me. And we did. We had to pay him. Well, word got out about him getting Social Security benefits while he was in prison. Congress passed the Son of Sam Act, and prisoners do not get Social Security. Drug addicts have not been able to get it since January of 1997. Next slide, please. Social Security is a base to build on, and this is important. Politicians are going around from both parties now and saying it's a needs program and people who don't need it shouldn't get it. It's not a needs program. SSI, another program run by Social Security, is a needs program. When Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act, he said it's a base to build on. That people should have Social Security guaranteed as a base. Pension, savings, insurance, investments, other income, IRAs came along later on. But the whole idea was that you would have a series of investments and you couldn't live on your Social Security. And the more you make, the more investments you'd have to make in order to be able to maintain your standard of living. I got a call 14 years ago now from Cyrus Vance, former Secretary of State. And he said to me, Lloyd, I didn't take my Social Security because I didn't need it. And people said I should waive it. And he waived it. He said, somebody finally explained to me that Social Security is not a needs program, and I'd like to get my Social Security and donate it to charity. He said, the problem is I signed that withdrawal. Can I take it? Can I withdraw it? And the answer was absolutely. He could withdraw it, but not retroactively. And for the last few years of his life, he got Social Security, and he gave the money to charity. That's the correct thing to do. Don't give it up because you don't need it. Social Security is not a needs program. You paid into it. It's social insurance. That's a big difference from a needs program. By the way, I'm allowed to discuss Mr. Vance because he told me when he died I could discuss him as an example. Next slide, please. It's not just retirement benefits, it's disability benefits for young workers who become disabled, it's death benefits for dependent survivors, and it's health care through Medicare. Next slide, please. Now, in 1937, they started taking out the Social Security tax on the first $3,000 in wages. They took out 1%, so it was $30 a year. The $3,000 was not an arbitrary figure. It was what Adam Smith wanted. In those days, $3,000, you were in the top 10% of wage earners. He didn't want it to go beyond that. People say to me, well, if you make $1 million in wages, why don't you pay the Social Security on $1 million? Because it's a tiered benefit. The more you pay in, the lower the rate of return. So if people paid in $1 million, the rate of return would be so small, it would really be a redistribution of income. Remember, Smith was a capitalist. He didn't want that. So he capped it. He said the program should be capped on the top 10% of wage earners. He also felt that if you didn't take money away from these wealthier people, that they would want to become wealthier, and they would invest, and it would build businesses, and it would create employment. Go to the next slide, please. The benefit keeps going up. The tax rate keeps going up as they add programs. They added survivor benefits in 1950, so it went up to 1.5%. Notice in 1951 it went up to $3,600 because that was the top 10% of wage earners. Next slide, please. It's not that way anymore. Next year the tax is on $113,700, which is the top 10% of wage earners. and the tax is 7.65%. People say to me, wait a minute, isn't it 6.2%? I include in this the 1.45% Medicare tax because they used to be combined, and I leave them combined. So if somebody makes $113,700 in wages next year, or adjusted gross from self-employment, they pay in $8,698.05. And the total anybody could pay in through next year is $182,991. Next page, please. Next. Now, in 2012, they lowered the Social Security benefit by 2%. So people paid in 5.65%, and it cut out at $110,100. The Medicare tax, which is 1.45% of that, has no limit on it. President Clinton said it doesn't affect Social Security benefits. They can take out the Medicare tax on the full salary. So if you make $1 million, you have to pay tax of 1.45% for Part A of Medicare. Next slide, please. Again, the tax goes up to $113,700 next year. Right now, it's scheduled to still be at 6.2%. So if Congress doesn't do something in the lame duck session, and I hope they don't, because Social Security will be in bad shape if they don't raise the tax back up to the 6.2%. But right now, it's scheduled to be at 7.65, including the 1.45% Medicare tax. Next slide, please. Self-employed individuals, and I'm one of those, pay both halves. Bummer, so we pay 15.3%. Next slide. So if somebody is 66 in 2013, you say, wait a minute, 66, what happened to 65? They're slowly raising the age for full benefits. In 2013, or anybody born 1943 to 1954 gets their full benefit at age 66. Now, if they paid maximum wages 37 for 2012, they've paid in, next slide, $174,293 in Social Security tax. Now, these people obviously haven't paid in $174,000 because they were born in 1951. So the most they've paid in is, they were born in 1947, I'm sorry. They started working in the 60s. They didn't work in 1937. They weren't even born then. So they've paid in about $160,000 in Social Security tax, and their monthly benefit is $2,533 at age 66. That's the maximum somebody can get in 2013 who's age 66 and paid at least 35 years at maximum rate. We'll explain the 35 years in a few minutes. Next slide, please. If they have a spouse who's 66 and a spouse with a low income or house spouse, the spouse gets half of what they get, so the spouse gets $1,256. The two of them combined get $3,799, and they're even in 3.82 years. But that's a lie. It's a lie because you paid the money in 60s, 70s, and 80s dollars, and you're getting it in 2020 dollars. In reality, you're even in about 8 years, but you're expected to live 14 and a half years. So it's a fair value program. Next slide. To get Social Security, you must be vested to qualify. It used to be you had to earn $50 in a calendar quarter in order to be able to get Social Security benefits. But what happened is school teachers and federal employees who didn't pay into Social Security formed an organization called Tempo, and they taught each other bridge, and they mowed each other's lawn for $50 every 3 months, paid the small Social Security tax, and got $127 minimum benefit. That was the minimum. It was bankrupting Social Security. Next slide. So you have to earn credits, what we used to call quarters of coverage. But in 1978, they changed the amount for a quarter from what was $50 to $250, and it goes up each year based on the wage increase in America. In 1977, when they did that, when they changed the law, Congress felt it was unfair to employers to have to make out quarterly reports to Social Security just so they can determine how many quarters a person had. So next year, if you make $1,160, you get a quarter. If you make 4 times that, $4,640, you will get $4,640, you will get all 4 credits. It doesn't make a difference if you earn them in one day, you'll get all 4 credits. But credits only determine vesting. It doesn't determine the amount of the benefit. So if somebody makes $50,000 a year, they're still only going to get 4 credits, but they'll get a higher benefit. There's a maximum of 4 credits to earn per year. You need 40 credits for retirement benefits. Younger workers need fewer credits for disability and survivor benefits. Go to the next slide, please. To get Social Security, the way it works is this. They add up your 35 highest indexed years. Social Security believes a full working lifetime is age 22 to 62. That's 40 years. They feel everybody's going to have 5 bad years, so they said we'll use the 35 highest years in computing the benefit. And then they decided to index those years to give them equal weight. So for instance, if somebody is 66, I'll get this right. If they're 62 in 2013 and they earned $1 in 1968, that dollar's worth about $7 now. So if they earned $1,000 that year, they'll get credit for $7,000. So they add up the 35 highest indexed years from the year you turn 62. Why 62? That's the earliest you can get Social Security benefits. So if somebody is 62 next year, for the first $791, they get a 90% return. So in other words, if they earn $300 a year over their working lifetime, they would get $270 a month at full retirement age 66. From $792 to $4768, they get 32%, and from $4769 on, they get 15%. Now the bend points change each year. Last year, the first bend point was 0 to 767. They changed based on the wage increase in America, and they just announced 2 days ago that the bend point for next year will be $791 for people turning 62 next year. Okay, next slide, please. So here's a person who has a very low income. They average $2,800 in indexed earnings over their lifetime. They get 90% of the first $791, 32% of the remainder to bring it to the total of $2,800, and their benefit is $1,354 a month. That's 48.3% of what they averaged over their working lifetime. Now here's a high income wage earner on the next slide. They averaged $8,250 a month over their working lifetime in index dollars. They get 90% of the first $791, 32% of the next $39.77, 15% of the remainder $34.82 to bring it to a total of $82.50. Their benefit is significantly higher than the other person, $25.06. But notice it's only 32.9% of what they averaged over their working lifetime, because this person has a better ability to save and invest and plan for their own retirement. They obviously can't live on 32.9% of what they made over their working lifetime. Next slide, please. Now they're raising the age for full benefits. People born in 1937 or before got their full benefit at age 65. People born between 43 and 54, the people who are turning age 66 and age 62 right now, have to be age 66 to get their full Social Security benefit. If you were born 1960 or later, you have to be age 67 to get your full Social Security benefit. Next slide, please. Now we have something called the windfall elimination provision. I want to talk about it quickly because I think it's important. Federal workers and state workers who did not pay into Social Security but went out and earned their 40 credits looked like low-income wage earners because maybe they had 10, 12, 14 years of Social Security. So when they added up their 35 highest years and divided by 420 to come up with an average index monthly earnings, they looked like low-income wage earners. And as a result, they were getting this 90% that really wasn't designed for them. So if somebody gets a pension based on non-Social Security covered employment, their Social Security disability or retirement benefits are affected. Go to the next slide, please. It does not apply if they have 30 years of substantial earnings. We'll explain substantial earnings later on if we have a chance. Go on to the next line. If they have 30 years of substantial earnings, they get 90% like everybody else does. If they have 26 years, they get 70%. Next slide. Most of them, like me, have 20 years or under, so rather than getting 90% on that first level, we get 40%. Go to the next slide, please. So here's somebody who earned $118,573 over their lifetime. With indexing, they get credit for $339,000. We divide that by 420, the number of months in 35 years, and their average index monthly earnings were $807.36. If they had not been a federal employee, they would get 90% of the first $791, 32% of the remainder, and they would get $717 a month. But because they were a federal employee, they get 40% of the $791, they get 32% of the remainder, and their benefit is $321. They lose $395 a month if they were a federal or state employee who did not pay into Social Security. Next slide, please. To get Social Security, you must not be working. In the year you turn full retirement age 66 currently, until the month you reach full retirement age, next year you can earn $40,080 and get your Social Security. So let's say somebody is going to be age 66 in May, and they're going to earn less than $40,080 January through April. They can get their Social Security actually starting in January if they want at a slightly lower rate. Once you reach full retirement age, it started in the year 2000, no matter how much you make, you can get your Social Security. Go to the next page, please. People between 62 and 66 are limited to $15,120 in wages. Now, the $15,120 only counts two things: gross wages and adjusted gross from self-employment. It doesn't count pensions. It doesn't count money you have in the bank. It doesn't count investments. All they care about is, are you working? Social Security is replacement income for wages lost due to retirement. Next slide, please. If you earn over the $15,120, for every $2 you earn, you lose $1 of your Social Security benefit. In the year you reach full retirement age, if you earn over the $40,000, for every $3 you earn, you lose $1. So on the top one, if you earn $1,000 over, you lose $500. On the bottom one, if you earn $1,000 over, you lose $333. Next slide, please. People say to me, what happens if I retire in the middle of a year and I've already made $100,000? Can I receive a check for that year, for the rest of the month? And the answer is yes, you can. You can get a check for any non-service month, regardless of what you earned for the year. Go to the next page. So next year, in the year you turn 66, let's say you're going to turn 66 in November, and you're going to earn over the $40,000. You can get a check for January through October. Excuse me, let's say you stop working in June, you made the $100,000. So you can get checks for July, August, September, October, as long as you make under $3,340. How'd they come up with $3,340? That's 1/12 of the annual total of $40,080. There are special rules for self-employed people. Self-employed people in the first year of retirement only can get a check for any month they work under 45 hours. Why do they have that special rule for self-employed people? Because it's very difficult to determine how much somebody made in a particular month when they're self-employed. There are months where I work 400 hours and make nothing. There are months where I work 40 hours and I make a lot of money because that's when I'm doing my billing. So they felt this was the only fair way to do it for self-employed people. Go to the next page, please. In years before full retirement age, next year you can make $1,260 and still get your Social Security for any month you make under $1,260 in the first year of retirement only. $1,260 is 1/12 of the annual total of $15,120. Go to the next slide, please. So here's somebody who made wages of $50,000 and stops working May 30th. Can they get checks for June through December? Absolutely, as long as they make under the monthly limit. Next slide. So here's the big question. You can get benefits at 62 and it's 75% of the full benefit. At age 66, you get 100%. If you wait till 70, they will give you a bonus of 8% per year beyond age 66. At 70, you must take your Social Security. So the question I get is, I'm 62, I'm not working, I don't need my Social Security, should I take it? Now what I used to say was, take it at age 62 or whatever age you stop working, put it in the bank, at age 66, give Social Security back their benefit, withdraw your claim, and you can take the claim at full benefit, a new claim at full benefit, and keep the interest you earned on that bank account perfectly legally. But they changed the law in 2011. Effective 2011, you can only withdraw your claim once, and you have to do it within a year of the original application. So that complicates things. So when people say to me, should I take it at 62? My answer is, darned if I know. It's really a three-stool seat that determines whether you should take Social Security. It's me who can tell you what you're eligible for. It's your financial planner who can tell you how they can invest the money and maybe make more than the difference. In other words, one financial planner said to me, he tells his clients that they've stopped working and they're 62 to take their benefit at the earliest point possible, invest in municipal bonds at 4%, that are tax-free. Social Security is taxable. And he says when they reach age, full retirement age, take the difference out of that account, and they're much better off. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I'm not a financial planner. You really need to work with Ralph and his associates on this to determine the best time to retire. It gets to be very, very tricky. I don't know. And then to complicate matters, go to the next slide. Social Security benefits used to not be taxed. They are taxed now. In 1984, an evil genius in the Reagan administration said Social Security benefits should be taxed. Why? And the reason it wasn't before that was Social Security was already taxed out of your salary. You couldn't deduct the Social Security tax from your pay, so it was already taxed. This person said, yes, that's true, but you pay 6.2% and your employer pays 6.2%, and your employer's 6.2% was never taxed as income to you. So they said if your adjusted gross income plus non-taxable interest income plus 1/2 your Social Security, next slide, exceeds $25,000 for an individual or $32,000 for a couple, half your Social Security will be taxed at whatever your tax rate is. Go to the next page. Along comes Bill Clinton. He said, I don't have to give you a reason. Using the same rules, go to the next page. If your income's over $34,000 for an individual or $44,000 for a couple, 85% of your Social Security is taxed at whatever your tax rate is. Now that's definitely double taxation, but what can we say? I don't know when you should take your Social Security anymore. It's really Ralph and financial advisors who can tell you when to get your Social Security. I can't do that. I can only tell you how much you can get and when you can get it. Now, we want to talk about spouse and widower's benefits. If you do two benefits, you get the higher amount. Most working spouses get more in their own Social Security retirement than they do on their marriage partners. Let me give you an example. One's getting $2,200 a month, one's entitled to $2,200 a month, one's entitled to $2,000 a month. Both get that, no problem. On the other hand, one's entitled to $2,200 a month and the other one's only entitled to $400 a month. Rather than $400, they would get half their spouse benefit. So they get $1,100. So you get the higher of the two benefits, your benefit on your own or your benefit as a spouse. You can now wait until age 66 and get your spouse benefit at the reduced rate, lower than your own, and let your own build up until age 70. That further complicates the situation. Because let's say your spouse benefit's $1,100 and your own is $900. Excuse me, your own is $1,100 and your spouse benefit's $900. You might be better off taking the $900 and letting yours build up at 8% until age 70. That's something we have to figure out when you're ready to retire. Again, there's a lot to it. Next slide. Unmarried divorced spouses can get benefits as long as they were married at least 10 years to the wage earner and they're unmarried. So my wife says to me, Her former husband, she was married more than 10 years to, Stanley, she says to me, Stanley's Social Security is $2,800 a month. Mine's only $1,400 a month. So if Stanley dies, I can get his $2,800 a month? I said, dear, you have to be unmarried. And you're talking about the death of two men, one of whom happens to be me, and I don't want to discuss that. Now she says to me, well, you know, you can end marriage other ways than death. I said, oh, boy. Anyway, to get Social Security benefits as a spouse, the wage earner must be collecting with one important exception. That exception is divorced spouses. Divorced spouses can get benefits if they're 62 and the wage earner is 62, even if the wage earner is working and getting too much money to get Social Security, even if the wage earner doesn't file a claim. The reason for that is Congress felt there were two reasons, actually. One was there were men who hated their ex-wife so much they refused to file for Social Security just so their ex-spouse couldn't get it. And they also felt it was unfair to this former spouse who's obviously not living with the person or being supported by them to have to wait until the wage earner stops working. So divorced spouses can get benefits even if the wage earner is working, as long as the wage earner is at least 62 years old. Spouse benefits are figured this way. At age 66, the spouse gets the full benefit, 50% of the wage earner's benefit. At age 62, they get about 35%. So the benefit rate is reduced depending on the age at which you take it. Go to the next slide, please. We had another problem with federal and state employees who receive benefits on their own accounts. Excuse me, on their benefits as a spouse, because the benefit as a spouse is designed for low-income or house spouses. And these people look like low-income or house spouses because they didn't work much under Social Security. So they felt that their pension, part of it is really what would have been Social Security. So if you're entitled to a spouse benefit or widow and widower's benefit, you're entitled to a pension based on non-Social Security covered employment. They're going to reduce your pension, your Social Security pension as a widow or a spouse. Go to the next slide, please. This does not apply. Well, don't go to the next slide. We don't need this slide. The way it works is for every $3 you get in civil service or state pension, you lose $2 from your benefit as a Social Security auxiliary. So go to the next slide, please. So here's a widower who's entitled to $1,000 a month Social Security as a widower. His civil service benefit is $2,000. They have to take 2/3 of that away from the Social Security, which is, so that's $1,332, and he gets no Social Security. So that's what they did to take care of that. So in other words, if my spouse dies, her benefit is a lot higher than mine. If she predeceases me, I can't get it because of my civil service pension. Next page. Widows and widowers can get their full benefit at age 66. They can collect as early as age 60, and it's 71.5% of their benefit on their spouse's full benefit. So it's very important to keep in mind that widows and widowers can collect as early as age 60. So if you're not working at age 60 and you're a widower, you can take that benefit, even though it's lower than your own, and switch over to your own at 62 or 66 or even 70 and get the full benefit. If your spouse and you are both collecting Social Security, let me go back to my original example. One's getting $2,200 a month and one's getting $2,000. The one getting the $2,200 dies. The one getting the $2,000 stops getting the $2,000 and starts getting the $2,200. That's the way it works. Disabled widows and widowers can collect as early as age 50, and it's 71.5%, just like at age 60. Children get benefits if they're 18 or 19 if they're in high school only. They get 75% of the full benefit of the wage earner. So a woman said to me, wait a second, she said, my husband died young. This all sounds good, but my husband died young. You use 35 years in the computation. How high can the benefit be? And while they use 35 years in a retirement claim, when a young worker dies, they take the age at which they died, let's say it's age 40, and they take away age 27. So they would only use 13 years in the computation. So even when a young worker dies, the benefit can be quite substantial. Why age 27? Remember, I said they believe age 22 is the beginning of a career, and they take away the 5 low years. So if somebody dies young, the benefit can still be very, very high. Supposing the widow or widower is not eligible for many years in the future, what would the benefit be worth? Social Security tax on cost of living increases every year, so that the benefit in real spending dollars maintains itself. So again, when a young worker dies, the benefit can be substantial to the widow or widower who collects later on. If a child is under 16, the mother or father of that child can also collect benefits at a 75% rate until the youngest child turns 16. That's if the mother or father is not working. Now, there's something called the family maximum. It's about 185% of the full benefit. So if the wage earner was entitled to $1,000 a month, the most the family can get is $1,850. So if there's more than two people collecting, they would divide the $1,850, and as one went off the rolls, the others would increase. Disabled children can get benefits if they became disabled before age 22, regardless of their age when you die, and they would get 75% of the full benefit of the wage earner. Next slide, please. Disability benefits does not cover partial or short-term disability. You must be expected to be disabled for at least a year, or it must be expected to result in your death. You must be unable to perform substantial gainful activity, meaning based on your age, education, and background, you can do no job that exists in the U.S. economy that would bring you $1,040 a month in income. So it's a pretty tough definition. It's a pretty tough definition. About 80% of the people who apply are denied at the first level. About 60% are denied at the second level. The third level is called a hearing. It's a very formal procedure before an administrative law judge. Please, if you're going to be involved in that level, hire a lawyer. But before then, don't get a lawyer. It's unnecessary in the first two levels. I will help you as much as I can. I will make sure your application and your benefit booklet, your disability booklet, you've made them as strong a case as you possibly can. I'm an expert on that. Please contact me before you file for disability benefits, and I will help you through the process. We want to make sure that you get the best benefit you possibly can without a lawyer. Lawyers charge 25% of the back benefit up to $6,000, and they slow the process down because the longer they wait, the more money they make. I hate binder and binder. I hate those guys. I want to see them practice real law. We can help you with your Social Security. Again, it's difficult to get it, but it's not impossible, and we'll help you. Let me give you an example of a case I had. I got a call from a friend of mine whose friend was denied Social Security because of a bad back. She said, will you mind talking to her? I talked to her, and she left out one little thing about her friend. Her friend named Christina, until 4 years before, was known as Christopher. She had, for whatever reason, in her 50s, gone and had a sex change operation at UCLA. And she put down she had a bad back. I said, you must be under tremendous stress. She says, I am. I said, well, you didn't put anything about the stress down here. And she said, well, stress is not my main problem. My main problem is my bad back. I said, well, let's put down the stress. It can't hurt. So I knew that she had to go to a psychologist to have that operation. And the psychologist must have written up a really good report because almost immediately she got $11,000 in back benefits, which caused me problems with my wife, by the way, because she had my home phone number and I was in Boise, Idaho. And she called, and my wife calls me and says, some guy named Christina just called you. I said, dear, it's a woman. She just has a deep voice. I'm not into kinky sex or anything like that. We can help you. We can make sure you make as strong a case as you possibly can. Now, benefits start with a 6 full month of disability. So if somebody becomes disabled today, they won't get checks for November, December, January, February, or March. The first month they get checks for is April. So for the first 6 months, you do not get disability benefits. Next slide, please. You must have worked in 5 out of the 10 years immediately preceding your disability if you're 31 years or older to get Social Security. If you're under age 31, you need less quarters. There's special rules for the blind. Blind people can get Social Security in any month in which they make under $1,690. So blind people can actually work some months take off some months, and get Social Security disability benefits. There's a trial work period for Social Security disability benefits. If you're getting the benefits and you work under 9 months, they will not stop your benefits. Then if you work in the 10th month or beyond and make over $1,040, they will stop your checks, but you have 9 months to try to go back to work. They didn't want to scare people out of the possibility of being able to go back to work, but the actual percentage of people that go back to work is about 4% because the disability definition is so severe. Most people can't go back to work, but if you want to try to go back to work, you absolutely can try. That's the end of my presentation. I don't have enough time to get to Medicare, but if you have any questions about Medicare during the question and answer session, I'll be only too happy to answer them. So let's talk about any questions that you have, folks.
I'm in the process of unmuting the lines, so everybody's line is unmuted. If you have a question, just come right on and just speak right up.
Ralph, I've got a question.
Okay.
Go for it.
He may have covered this prior to me coming on, but how is Social Security tied to Medicare? If I don't have enough Social Security...
If you don't have the 40 credits, you have to pay $400 a month for Part A of Medicare.
Okay. That should answer it. Thank you.
Do
Okay.
you have any other questions? We've got a quiet audience today, Lloyd.
Okay, let's go on to Medicare then. We have enough time to do Medicare.
Okay.
Excuse me?
This is Naima. I was going to suggest that you go ahead and do Medicare.
Okay, let's do Medicare. Go on to the next slide, please, Ralph.
I'm not sure if Rod was trying to get in there with a question.
Rod, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. Medicare is for people who are 65 or older. Next slide. Or receive disability checks from Social Security for 24 months. Or next slide. Or anybody who's on kidney dialysis for 3 months or longer is under Part B of Medicare, is under all of Medicare. Excuse me. There's no provision for early retirement. What does that mean? You're 62 and you're healthy, you're getting your Social Security, can you get your Medicare? The answer is no, not until you're 65. The earliest you can get it if you're not disabled is age 65. Part A of Medicare is the hospital part. We don't have the figure yet for 2013, but this year if you go into the hospital, you pay the first $1,156, and then Medicare pays the rest of the hospital bill for the next 60 days. How did they come up with $1,156? That's the average cost of a one-day stay in a hospital in the United States. I'd love to know where a hospital is. It's $1,156 a day. That sounds very cheap. Go to the next slide. So then Medicare covers you for the next 60 days. All of your hospital bills are taken care of. Next slide. From the 61st through the 90th day, next slide, you have to pay $289 per day. You don't have to worry about that for two reasons. One is the odds on you staying in a hospital more than 60 days are less than winning the big prize in Lotto. And the second one is you all have insurance that will cover for as long as you need to stay in the hospital. Go to the next slide. The reason you're not going to stay in the hospital more than 60 days is Medicare is going to move you to what they call a skilled nursing facility, what you and I call a nursing home. And this is a real problem. Medicare pays up to 100 days in a nursing home, but once it becomes custodial care, the person's got to be bathed, fed, clothed, looked after, Medicare stops paying. By the 14th day, in most cases, Medicare is going to say it's now custodial care and we're no longer paying. That's why I strongly recommend, and I'm sure Ralph has done this too, long-term care insurance. Believe me, nursing homes in Orange County and San Diego County and Riverside County average about $8,000 a month. $8,000 a month. And that'll burn through all your accumulated earnings like you wouldn't believe. So we strongly recommend that you get long-term care insurance to pay for nursing homes. Next slide, please.
Whoops.
Okay, thank you. Part A of Medicare also pays for home health services. If you've been in the hospital for at least 3 days and you come home and you need physical rehabilitation, Medicare pays 100% of that. If you need visiting nurse service, which somebody comes in once or twice a week and changes bandages, Medicare pays 100% of that. Then the last thing, next slide. Medicare pays hospice benefits. If you're within 6 months of death and you choose to die at home under hospice care, or you decide to die in a hospice, Medicare will pay 100% of hospice benefits. Now, you must agree to 2 things. DNR, do not resuscitate. Medicare will not pay for any extended care, and it pays for palliative pain-killing care only. You must understand that you're dying. So I had a gentleman in a class I did in Hawaii, and he comes up to me and he says, "Lloyd, this is amazing. My father is 93 years old and my father's dying. My father is 93 years old and he's a proud Portuguese. He will never admit that he's dying. Can he get hospice care?" I said, "No, the answer is he must understand that he's dying and he must agree to it." So he said to me, "You'll never do that. What do I do?" I said, "You go home and you have this conversation with your father. Dad, you know you're not dying? I know you're not dying. But we'll have to lie to Medicare to get benefits." He came back and said, "That worked?" I said, "It always works. People love to lie to the government to get benefits." Now, that's all there is to Part A of Medicare. Part B of Medicare is the controversial part of Medicare. It's the part that's going broke. Part A is not in any financial trouble at all. Give me the next slide, please. Part B this year costs $99.90 a month. We don't know what it'll cost next year, but it can't go up more than 1.7%, which is the Social Security increase for next year. They'll probably announce it after the election, unless it's, well, they may announce it before the election and brag about the small sum that it's going up. So it'll probably be about $101 next year, but we don't have the exact figure. Next slide. Part B premiums cannot go up more than the percentage increase in Social Security, as I said. So most people will continue to pay the $99.90. That $96.40 was the benefit amount in 2011. Go to the next page. It covers doctors, outpatients, lab tests, and those kinds of things. Next page. There's an annual deductible of $140. You have to pay doctor bills of $140 a year. And then after that, Medicare will pay 80% of what it considers reasonable. Next slide. What it considers reasonable, you and I don't. What it considers reasonable is what the 75th percentile of doctors in an area were charging 3 years ago. So it's vital that you get a plan that will help pay for Part B and for Part A. And the plans are called Advantage plans in California. And these plans are very, very good. In your Medicare handbook, they have a list of all the Advantage plans, and they rate them by client satisfaction. And most of them are rated very, very highly. We strongly recommend you get one. Now, Part B does not pay for prescriptions. It doesn't pay for dental. It doesn't pay for hearing aids, and it doesn't pay outside the U.S. No Medicare parts pay outside the U.S. So if you're going to take a cruise and you're going outside the U.S., or you're going to take a trip to Europe, we strongly recommend that you buy travel insurance while you're outside the U.S. Make sure the travel insurance will pay the bills of the doctors while you're overseas, and make sure that it will get you home as soon as it possibly can. The best care is in the United States. There's no question about that. You want to get home. Besides, the doctors there don't speak English, and it's more difficult to understand them. My son lived in Japan, and he wound up in a Japanese hospital. And he said, first of all, because of socialized medicine, there were 8 people to a room. He didn't like that very much. And he said they were 50 years behind us technically. And even though he speaks fluent, non-accented Japanese, when they would start throwing around medical terms, he thought they were talking about his throat when they were talking about his appendix. It's hard enough in English. People would come to me and say, I have a myocardial infraction. I said, well, I think that's a 10-yard penalty. I don't know what you think, but I believe the best care is in the USA. And I had a very sad case in 1985. A couple in La Jolla took the Love Boat from Seattle to Alaska. On the high seas, the husband had a heart attack. If you think the care is good, on the TV program, it was much better in real life. They helicoptered the doctor to the ship. When they got back to La Jolla, they got a bill for $30,000. This is 1985. They called me and they said, Medicare should pay for this. I said, no, Medicare doesn't pay outside the U.S. They said, we read your pamphlet. You pay between the lower 48 states and Alaska. We said, yeah, we do, but only by the most reasonable route, airplane or Pan American Highway. You're out, okay, the Pan American Highway, you're out $30,000. So please, 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 if you're going to take a cruise or you're going to take a trip outside the U.S., please get travel insurance. You can get it through travel agencies. Probably Ralph can help you get it, but it's really important that you have it when you go outside the United States. Next slide, please. Okay, Part D of Medicare, I don't cover in this section. Part D of Medicare is the drug part of Medicare, and the rates vary. It pays for drugs, and it depends on the plan you have. You can get an HMO style plan, which are low cost and low deductibles, low co-payments, excuse me, and those require you to take generic drugs if they're available, and they cover about 95% of the currently prescribed drugs. They cover about 95% of the most commonly prescribed drugs. There's another plan that's a fee-for-service plan. It has high premiums. It has high co-payments. You have to pay, for instance, the first $300 a year in drug bills. Then from $300 to about $2,800, you have to pay 25% of the cost of drugs. Then they have what they call the donut hole. From $2,800 to $4,800, you have to pay 50% of the cost of drugs. 50% of the cost of drugs. Then over $4,800, you pay 5%, and Medicare pays 95% of the cost of drugs. And that's Part D of Medicare. Most of you have a drug component built into your Medicare supplement. If you do, you don't need Part D of Medicare, and we strongly suggest against taking it. It's expensive, and there's no reason for it if you have a drug component in your Medicare Advantage or Medicare supplemental plan. Anybody have any questions?
Let me unmute the lines, and you guys can mute your lines back if you don't want to ask any questions. But I've unmuted everybody's lines now. So does anybody have any questions for Lloyd or for me? I'm hearing none. Although I am hearing Rod's getting a lot of feedback there.
Okay, I've got a question.
Okay,
Bob.
He said, don't take Part B if you have a drug component.
No, don't take Part D if you have a drug component in your Part B plan.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, don't take the dog plan if you have drug component in Part B.
In the boy plan.
Part
right.
B, okay.
In the boy plan, yeah.
Perfect.
If you later on need it, there's no penalty to switch over to Part D as long as you had a plan that covered drugs initially. So if your Advantage plan or your supplemental plan drops drug coverage, you can always pick it up with no penalty.
Hey, Lloyd, I've noticed in my reviews with clients that they used to be able to bring me a statement from Social Security, and lately, when we're doing a planning, the clients they don't get these statements in the mail anymore. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there's no longer a statement. If you go to SSA.gov and you go to retirement estimate, they will give you a very accurate retirement estimate. It knows how much you've earned, and they also will show you your earnings if you want to see them. That's new online. They ask you a bunch of personal questions to make sure it's really you, and then they will give you a benefit estimate, and it's much more accurate than that green sheet used to be. But remember, it's making certain presumptions. If it gives you an age 62 amount, it's presuming you're working till age 62 and making the amount you currently make. If it gives you an age 66 amount, it presumes you're making that amount until age 66. If it gives you an age 70 amount, It means it presumes you're working until age 70 and making the last amount you made. So if you're deciding to retire earlier, those amounts are not accurate, and I can help you figure out your Social Security benefit. Get in touch with me, and we'll show you how to do that. Any other questions, Ralph?
I'm not really sure if we have any more questions out there. I'm going to try and get your contact information back up on the screen here.
Okay, great.
If I can. Okay, here we go. Making progress. Well, it goes slow this way. As Lloyd had mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, and especially if they're about your situation personally, he's provided your information and his contact information through this earlier part of the presentation. And I'm trying to get back to, there we go. Oops.
Got it. Okay. Oh, doesn't want to give it out.
There we go. There we go. So there's the contact information. If you want to get a hold of Lloyd directly, you can call or email or go onto his website. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be running, have this up on our website as a replay. Lloyd, I think you've given me permission to share this presentation, this PowerPoint presentation as well.
Right, absolutely.
So if anybody wants a copy of it. Yeah, we're speaking over each other. If anybody wants a copy, just drop me an email or give me a call, and I'll send you a copy of this PowerPoint presentation by email, and you'll be able to have all this information at your disposal. And again, we'll put that up on the website as well once we get approval from our marketing regulatory review people down in San Diego.
If you email me, by the way, I always answer emails on the day I receive them. I'm an insomniac. I'm up till 2 in the morning answering emails. Please, please, please don't give my number out to your friends and relatives. This is paid for by Ralph as a service to you who attended the seminar. And I will answer any questions you have. And again, we'll spend as much time as you need going over the topic. I want to make sure that you have the answers necessary to make the correct decision.
Okay, that being said, if there's no other questions, let's see. I got something coming in. Well, you know, we've run our hour, and I don't want to run you too much longer, Lloyd. Thanks, everybody, and we will talk to you soon. You can call us offline.
Thank you all very much.
Take care now.
Thank you.